Ever notice how the loudest one in the room is rarely the one in control? The ones who talk the most often have the least to say, but the quiet one, the one who watches, waits, and says almost nothing, that's the one you should never ignore. Because silence isn't weakness. It's just a strategy. It's clarity. And when used right, it's the most powerful language in the world. Machiavelli understood this. He wrote that it's often safer to be feared than loved. But he also knew that fear doesn't come from noise. It comes from presence. And the Stoics, they mastered the art of inner stillness, of speaking only when necessary and acting only when wise. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire not by shouting but by ruling over himself first. In this video, we're diving deep into how silence wins every time. As a weapon of self-mastery, a signal of strength, and a Stoic path to absolute control over your emotions, your energy, and your influence. So if you're done being drained by noise and ready to command respect without saying a word, hit like, subscribe, and let's begin. Because power doesn't beg to be heard. It's felt without explanation.
Number 1.
Silence as a Stoic virtue. In a world that screams for attention, the Stoic chooses silence. Not because he has nothing to say, but because he has learned that most noise is hollow and most reactions costly. The ancient Stoics understood something that modern society has forgotten. Silence is not emptiness. It is a form of presence. It is space carved out for reason, for virtue, for mastery of the self. Epictetus, the former slave-turned-philosopher, often reminded his students that external chaos is irrelevant if you control your internal responses. He once said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." That requires a deep stillness, a willingness to be misunderstood rather than betray your inner peace for momentary validation. In this context, silence isn't just restraint. It's courage. It's a kind of inner armor that shields you from the arrows of ego, pride, and insecurity. The Stoics were not monks hiding from the world. They were emperors, generals, senators, and thinkers embedded in the heart of civilization. And yet they practiced a kind of mental withdrawal, a cultivated detachment that began with silence. Marcus Aurelius, emperor of Rome, ruled a fractious empire and led armies in brutal wars. Yet he carved out time each night to retreat inward. In the quiet of his mind, he wrote to himself, not as a leader, but as a student of life. Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul, he wrote. And in that retreat, he found not escape, but clarity. Contrast this with the modern age. Our attention is fragmented. Our thoughts are constantly pulled outward by the pings, notifications, and reactions of a hyper-connected world. In such an environment, silence is not just rare, it's radical. To be silent today is to reject the demand to perform. It's to say, I do not need to broadcast my worth. I will demonstrate it quietly through action and presence. Seneca, advisor to Emperor Nero and one of the sharpest Stoic minds, observed that most of our problems arise from speaking too much and thinking too little. In his letter on the shortness of life, he writes, "The part of life we really live is small, for all the rest of existence is not life, but merely time." What steals our life, he argued, is not just distraction, but the compulsion to be constantly involved, constantly reacting, constantly expressing ourselves without pause or purpose. Silence for Seneca was not withdrawal, it was discernment. This idea that silence refines us is central to Stoic ethics, because at the core of Stoicism is the pursuit of virtue, and virtue requires judgment. But judgment cannot flourish in a cluttered mind. It needs space. It needs quiet. It needs the humility to observe before acting, to question before asserting, and to reflect before reacting. Silence provides that space. Now consider this. In most arguments, the person who speaks the least usually holds the most power. Not because they're disinterested, but because they're not ruled by emotion. They've learned through disciplined silence to listen not just to words but to intentions. They see what others miss. They watch not just what is said, but why it's said. This observational clarity is what made Stoics formidable. Their silence wasn't passive, it was surgical. Even outside Stoic tradition, history favors the silent strategist. Machiavelli, though often misunderstood as purely cynical, observed in The Prince that men are so simple and so much inclined to obey immediate needs that a deceiver will never lack victims. Not the implication? Those who speak too much give themselves away. The wise ruler, by contrast, keeps his thoughts concealed, revealing only what is necessary, and that too is a kind of Stoicism. The discipline to remain opaque, not to manipulate, but to protect one's clarity. Silence, then, becomes both shield and sword. It shields you from impulsivity and overexposure, and it cuts through noise with the sharp edge of intentionality. When you finally do speak, after long observation, after deliberate thought, your words land with 10 times the force. Not because they're louder, but because they carry weight. They have been tempered in fire. They are backed by virtue. But let's bring this into your life. Have you ever regretted something you said in the heat of the moment? Have you ever wished you'd paused, breathed, and chosen silence instead of a reactive response? That moment of regret is your proof. Silence is an absence. It's a discipline. And discipline, as the Stoics taught, is freedom. To cultivate this kind of silence, you must first change what you value. If you value being seen, being right, or being praised, then silence will always feel like defeat. But if you value wisdom, peace, and self-command, then silence becomes your ally. It's the space where virtue is born. This mastery of silence is not just for emperors and philosophers. It is for anyone who chooses to live deliberately. Consider the modern professional who pauses in meetings, letting others rush to speak. His silence creates tension, but also gravity. He's perceived as thoughtful, precise, grounded. His silence is not emptiness, it's presence. Or think of the father who does not scold in anger, but looks his child in the eye, waits, and speaks with calm. That pause becomes a lesson in itself. He teaches not just with words, but with control. Silence also trains us to hear the world more clearly. It sensitizes us to nuance, to what is said and what is left unsaid. In this way, it strengthens the Stoic practice of oikeiosis, the natural orientation toward harmony with others and with nature. When we are silent, we are more likely to attune ourselves to the needs, fears, and motives of others. And when we do speak, our words are more likely to bridge conflict than inflame it. Ultimately, silence invites us to return to what the Stoics believed was the most important practice of all: living in accordance with nature. Nature does not shout. It unfolds. It acts without needing recognition. It perseveres without applause. The wise man, like nature, acts from inner principle, not external pressure. And silence is his ally in this sacred effort. It is the ground from which wisdom rises and the gate through which peace enters. So the next time you feel the urge to speak just to fill the air, pause. Ask yourself, is this coming from clarity or compulsion? Is it rooted in wisdom or insecurity? Because every unnecessary word you utter is a piece of power handed away. And every moment of silence you hold intentionally is a signal to yourself and others that you are not here to react. You are here to rule yourself. Silence is not a void. It is the beginning of mastery. It is where your mind becomes your own again. And in that space, untouched by the world's demands, you find what the Stoics treasured above all: peace, virtue, and the strength to walk through fire without a word.
Number 2.
Silence as self-mastery and emotional regulation. Silence is not simply a technique, it is a test. A test of whether your emotions control you or whether you command them. In the teachings of the Stoics, the ability to remain calm under pressure, to withhold reaction in the face of provocation, was the very essence of power. It wasn't about denial, it was about dominion. As Epictetus said, No man is free who is not master of himself. And silence used wisely is the battlefield where that mastery is proven. Most people speak out of urgency. They're driven by the storm within, anger, fear, the compulsive need to be heard or validated. But for the Stoics, silence is a boundary. It is the deliberate pause between stimulus and response. It is what allows a man to be aware of his emotions without being ruled by them. When someone insults you, silence is not weakness. It is the refusal to hand over your emotional sovereignty to another person's chaos. Take Cato the Younger, the Stoic senator who opposed Julius Caesar. Cato was not a loud man, but he was an immovable one. In the Roman Senate, he would sit quietly while others debated with fire and fury. But when he did speak, his words were grounded in principle, not pride. He never allowed emotion to hijack his clarity. His silence was not retreat. It was presence. And it gave him the strength to resist tyranny, even at the cost of his life. This is where silence becomes a form of emotional regulation. Not a suppression of feeling, but a redirection of energy. When you choose not to react, you choose to investigate. You examine why the insult stung, why the situation triggered you, why your body tensed. In that space of silence, you become aware, and awareness is the root of all mastery. Without it, we're puppets of our emotions. With it, we become authors of our responses. Seneca taught that anger is temporary madness. It makes us forget who we are and what matters. He advised that when provoked, one should step back, not just physically, but mentally. Silence gives us that distance. It's the breath that prevents the blow, the pause that prevents the apology, the space that allows reason to re-enter the room before damage is done. But this discipline isn't developed overnight. It's forged in repetition. Every time you resist the urge to lash out or defend yourself impulsively, you build the inner muscle of restraint. And over time, this muscle becomes a fortress. It shields you not just from conflict, but from regret. Because most of what ruins our peace is not what happens to us, but how we respond. And the silent man, the one who holds his center, is not easily ruined. Marcus Aurelius too understood this. As emperor, he was insulted, challenged, even betrayed. But he often reminded himself in his meditations that other people's actions were outside his control, and only his mind was his to govern. You have power over your mind, not outside events, he wrote. Realize this, and you will find strength. His silence in moments of crisis was not indifference. It was a disciplined return to what mattered. His reason, his purpose, his virtue. And here lies the paradox. The more silent you are in reaction, the more powerful you become in action. Because silence creates clarity, and clarity sharpens action. When you're not reacting, you're observing. When you're not defending, you're adapting. And when you're not speaking, you're listening, not just to others, but to yourself. This is emotional regulation in its highest form. Not avoidance, but transformation. In practical terms, this means you don't have to respond to every insult. You don't have to explain yourself every time you're misunderstood. You don't have to match chaos with chaos. Your calm is not a performance, it's a practice. And like all practices, it gets stronger the more you honor it. Every time you choose silence over a heated comeback, every time you breathe instead of break, you're mastering yourself. But let's be clear, silence isn't passive. It's an act of will. It takes effort to sit with discomfort, to watch the emotion rise and fall without reacting. This is the true Stoic challenge, to feel fully but act wisely, to be stirred but not shaken, to burn without burning others. So the next time you're triggered, don't just try to stay quiet. Go deeper. Ask, what am I feeling? Why? What would the wise version of me do next? This shift from impulsive reaction to conscious pause is where transformation happens. Because the goal of Stoicism is not to suppress emotion, it's to clarify it, understand it, and use it in service of virtue. And silence is the doorway to that clarity. Even Socrates, often considered the father of Western philosophy, practiced a form of controlled silence that disarmed his opponents. His method, known as the Socratic dialogue, relied more on asking questions than making assertions. He didn't try to dominate conversations. He led by listening. This wasn't weakness. It was a razor-sharp form of control. By saying less, he revealed more. About others, about truth, and about the self. The Stoics admired this deeply because it aligned with their core belief. Speak less, but with more meaning. And this practice isn't confined to history or philosophy. Look at modern figures like Nelson Mandela. After spending 27 years in prison, he emerged not bitter, not vengeful, but composed. In interviews and public appearances, he often paused before answering. His silence wasn't hesitation, it was precision. He had learned through suffering that reaction without reflection is a form of self-betrayal, and his leadership, marked by restraint and dignity, changed the course of a nation. This proves an important point. Silence is most powerful when it's earned. You don't just become calm. You train for it. You live through storms. You get tired of your own noise. You watch your past reactions bring harm or regret, and you decide there must be another way. That decision to evolve beyond your impulses is the beginning of mastery, and silence is how that mastery is maintained. So when you choose silence, not out of fear, but out of clarity, you are no longer enslaved by the mood of the moment. You are guided by something deeper, something stronger. You are no longer pulled by the emotional weather outside you. You have become the sky, vast, steady, untouched by every passing storm. This is how silence becomes self-mastery, not by numbing emotion, but by commanding it. Not by denying pain, but by turning it into power. The Stoic does not seek to be unaffected. He seeks to be unruled. And in that quest, silence is not just helpful. It is essential.
Number 3.
Silence as a path to understanding instead of manipulation. In a world obsessed with persuasion, performance, and attention, the Stoic walks a different path. He does not remain silent to appear mysterious or to manipulate perception. He remains silent to understand, because understanding, not control, is the foundation of wise living. The Stoics believe that we cannot act virtuously unless we first see clearly. Clarity, however, cannot be achieved through noise. It is not found in constant talking, debating, or explaining. It is found in observation, in listening, in stillness. This is why silence to the Stoic is not tactical, it is philosophical. It is the precondition for insight. Epictetus taught his students to listen more than they speak, not because their opinions were unimportant, but because rushing to speak often cuts us off from the truth. Nature gave us one tongue and two ears, so we could hear twice as much as we speak, he said. Listening for him was an act of humility. And humility was not weakness. It was the beginning of wisdom. Consider Marcus Aurelius again. As emperor of Rome, he had access to all forms of power: wealth, status, military might. And yet his personal writings are filled not with prideful declarations, but with questions, with self-examination, with attempts to understand the world and his place in it. This curiosity was rooted in silence. He did not assume he knew, he sought to learn, and silence gave him the space to do so. This applies to all of us. Think about how rare it is today to be truly listened to, not judged, because not interrupted, not advised, just heard. When someone gives you their full attention without inserting their own agenda, you feel seen, understood, respected. That is the power of silence, not as manipulation, but as presence. This is where the Stoic view of silence diverges from Machiavellian cunning. Machiavelli and the Prince argued that silence can be used to conceal intentions, to outmaneuver enemies, and to dominate perception. And while there is strategic merit in that, the Stoic is not interested in control for its own sake. He does not speak less to deceive. He speaks less to perceive. The Stoic uses silence to decode behavior. He studies reactions. He observes patterns, and in doing so, he gains a clearer picture. unclouded by bias or emotion. Seneca wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it." One of the greatest wastes is to speak before seeing, to judge before understanding. And so silence becomes a diagnostic tool. When you're quiet, people reveal themselves. They show you their insecurities, their motives, their values, often unintentionally. The more you listen, the more clearly you see, and the clearer you see, the wiser your actions become. This practice isn't abstract. It applies to everything from conflict resolution to leadership. A Stoic leader doesn't rush to command. He observes first. He understands the dynamics of the group. He learns who needs support, who seeks attention, and who responds to quiet strength. Then, and only then, does he speak with precision and purpose. One of the most powerful modern examples of this is Abraham Lincoln. Known for his long pauses during conversation, Lincoln rarely responded immediately. He listened, he reflected, and when he finally spoke, it was often with such clarity and thoughtfulness that people remembered his words long after. His silence wasn't hesitation, it was awareness in action. This doesn't mean silence is always easy. Often it feels uncomfortable. We want to fill the air, explain ourselves, defend our views. But the Stoic trains himself to sit with that discomfort, to wait, to notice what others miss, to allow the full truth of a moment to emerge before responding. This takes strength, but it also builds it. The ancient Stoics spoke often of two critical concepts: oikeiosis, our natural orientation toward connection and understanding, and prohairesis, our faculty of moral choice. Silence, for them, sharpened both. It helped one attune to the patterns of nature and society, and at the same time, preserve the integrity of inner judgment. Because only when we understand clearly can we choose rightly. And that clarity can only arise in stillness. Viktor Frankl, the Austrian psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, echoed this principle in modern language. He said, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. Namrana, that space, that silence, is where wisdom lives." Frankl's ability to observe, reflect, and understand, even in the midst of profound suffering, was a living embodiment of Stoic insight. The external world is not what defines you. Your perception and response do. Nowhere is this more important than in relationships. In arguments, most people are not truly listening. They are preparing their rebuttal. The Stoic does not fall into this trap. He does not listen to win. He listens to understand the deeper truth beneath the surface. Often what seems like hostility is fear. Arrogance is insecurity. And power? Sometimes a mask for pain. This is not just philosophical, it's practical. When you're in a difficult conversation and you choose silence over interruption, you allow the other person's truth to emerge more fully. You invite them to reveal themselves. And in doing so, you gain an advantage. Not to exploit them, but to choose your response with intelligence and virtue. Even Queen Elizabeth I was known for her patience in court. She would often remain silent during long debates, allowing her advisors and opponents to talk themselves into revealing motives, fears, or contradictions. Her silence created pressure, but also revealed insight. And when she spoke, her words shaped empires. That's the power of listening governed by purpose. Silence is also ethical. It allows us to see others more clearly and treat them more justly. We are less reactive, less judgmental, more present. And presence, real presence, is the rarest currency in human interaction. It builds trust. It invites authenticity. And it lays the groundwork for right action. The world today is full of reactive noise. But the Stoic doesn't join the chorus. He stands back. He watches. He reflects. And then, when the time is right, he speaks. Not to impress, but to impact. Not to manipulate, but to move closer to truth. Silence in this way is an absence. It's the condition for meaningful action. So when you feel the urge to speak just to fill a void, pause. When you feel the pressure to respond before you've understood, wait. Not to suppress your voice, but to strengthen it. Because every silent moment is a chance to learn. And those who learn more live wiser. Silence is most powerful when it's earned. You don't just become calm, you train for it. You endure storms, grow tired of your own noise, and see past reactions bring regret. That's when you realize there must be another way. And that realization is where mastery begins. Silence is how it's kept. And ultimately, that's the Stoic aim. Not to be seen as wise, but to become wise. And that journey always begins in silence.
Number 4.
Projecting strength through inner control. In the eyes of the Stoics, true power has nothing to do with how loud you are, how intimidating you appear, or how many people you can command. Strength, real strength, is measured by what you can command within yourself. The ancient world was filled with rulers who barked orders and demanded loyalty. But the ones we remember with respect are those who mastered themselves first. Because inner control isn't just a personal virtue, it's a public force. To the Stoics, virtue was the only true good, and virtue begins with self-command. A man who cannot govern his emotions cannot lead others. A man who cannot control his impulses cannot inspire trust. And a man who reacts to everything cannot be relied upon in anything. So the Stoic trains, not in how to dominate others, but in how to remain unmoved by insult, provocation, or praise. His calmness is not apathy, it is discipline. Marcus Aurelius faced countless provocations as emperor. He fought wars, endured betrayals, and faced loss, yet he remained composed. In his meditations, he reminded himself not to be overcome by circumstances, but to control them through reason. He projected strength through presence. People followed him not because he commanded them, but because he embodied clarity amid chaos. And this is where silence becomes essential, because nothing demonstrates control like restraint. The ability to pause, to not speak when angry, to not retaliate when provoked, is not weakness. It's mastery. As Seneca wrote, "He who is brave is free." And in the bravest among us are often the ones who hold their tongue, slow their breath, and choose their moment carefully. Consider Nelson Mandela. After 27 years in prison, he emerged not bitter, not vengeful, but composed. His demeanor didn't just reflect forgiveness, it radiated power. He could have used rage. Instead, he used calm, and the world listened. His inner control wasn't just personal, it reshaped an entire nation. Why does this kind of calm hold so much power? Because most people are reactive. They live at the mercy of their moods, the chaos of others, and the opinions of strangers. When someone walks into a room who is clearly not swayed by flattery, not disturbed by criticism, not pulled by emotion, that person commands attention. Not because they try to, but because they don't need to. Their silence isn't absence. It's a signal. I am not here to compete. I am here to stay rooted. This level of composure creates what the Stoics called euthymia, a steady, cheerful confidence grounded in one's purpose. It's not arrogance. So it's alignment. And that kind of alignment cannot be faked. It must be earned through practice, through pain, through relentless inner work, through silence, patience, reflection, and correction. Even in military leadership, we see this truth repeated. General Dwight D. Eisenhower was known not for aggression, but for calm authority. He listened. He measured. And then he acted. In World War II, when chaos was everywhere, his composure inspired trust from both allies and troops. He wasn't just a general, he was a grounding force. This philosophy also ties into the Stoic pursuit of ataraxia, a state of unshakable tranquility. While many chase peace through external control, the Stoic understands that true peace comes from internal harmony. When your actions align with your values and your mind is not pulled by every emotion, you radiate calm. This kind of stillness is rare, and that rarity is what makes it powerful. George Washington, too, modeled this kind of strength. During the American Revolution and throughout his presidency, he faced betrayals, political sabotage, and enormous uncertainty. Yet those who worked with him consistently remarked on his stillness. his ability to listen carefully, speak minimally, and act decisively. He was not just respected for his title, he was trusted for his temperament. That trust came from discipline, not dominance. The Stoic pursuit of excellence in character, means that your presence should speak before your voice does. The way you carry yourself, the energy you bring into a room, the ability to hold silence without insecurity, these are the marks of someone who has done the hard work of mastering their impulses. In a culture obsessed with visibility, the one who needs no performance becomes unforgettable. And perhaps what the world needs now is not louder voices, but steadier souls. Not more outrage, but more order. That begins with you, with the space you create inside yourself, with the quiet strength you cultivate every time you resist the urge to prove something and choose instead to be something. Inner control is not glamorous. It doesn't make headlines, but it shapes legacies. And those who lead with virtue, who project strength not through fear but through calm, become the kind of people others look to, not just in moments of peace but in times of crisis. Their silence is not emptiness. It is a signal, a message, a force. So how do you develop this kind of inner control? First, by understanding that not everything requires your opinion. You don't need to respond to every insult, defend every action, or attend every argument you're invited to. Every unnecessary reaction chips away at your power, but every pause rebuilds it. Second, by training the body to obey the mind. As Epictetus taught, we cannot choose our external circumstances, but we can always choose how we respond to them. Sotatorun. That response begins with breath, with posture, with silence. These aren't passive tools. They signal that you are ruled by principle, not emotion. And third, by becoming difficult to provoke, not out of indifference, but out of purpose. The Stoic understands that every provocation is a test. Will you remain who you are, or will you become what they want you to be? Inner control is the shield that protects your character from the moods of others. But make no mistake, this is not easy. It requires the courage to be misunderstood, the strength to walk away, and the patience to wait until you can speak with clarity rather than rage. It is the art of slowing down in a world that rushes. It is the art of responding with principle instead of panic. One of the most overlooked aspects of this is how inner control affects leadership. People follow calm leaders, not because they shout, but because they create safety. They give others permission to slow down, to breathe, to reflect. And that's what makes their influence last long after their words fade. In your own life, consider how you show up. When you walk into a room, does your energy say, "Please accept me"? Or does it say, "I accept myself"? The first seeks approval. The second radiates presence. And presence, when born from inner control, needs no introduction. So the next time you're tempted to prove your worth, don't. The next time you're triggered and ready to react, pause. The next time you're called to speak, ask, will this come from ego or from principle? Because strength isn't in the volume of your voice, it's in the clarity of your mind. The Stoic doesn't chase power. He becomes it. And he does it not through noise, but through silence. Not through aggression, but through discipline. Not by forcing control over others, but by mastering the only thing that's ever truly his, himself. In a world that's constantly shouting, silence is your power. When you master your emotions, observe before reacting, and act from clarity, not compulsion, you become untouchable. That's what the Stoics knew. You don't need to prove anything. You just need to live by principle. Because true strength isn't loud, it's steady, it's calm, and it's deeply rooted in the self. If this message resonates with you, subscribe for more Stoic wisdom. And remember, don't just know these ideas. Live them. Live them. Because the world doesn't need more noise. It needs more people like you, still strong and sovereign.